Hello guys, my name is Anna and I'm from Ukraine, and I vlog daily since the start of this awful Russian war in Ukraine from my country to keep you updated on real life situation. And sometimes it is not about Ukraine and Russia but about other countries. So today I want to speak about two countries that are actually not far away from each other but are very different, same as Ukraine and Russia, and that is China and Japan. I was very carefully observing the preparation to the visit of Xi Jinping to Moscow because I hoped that the decision of the International Criminal Court that Putin must be arrested and taken to Hague will stop the Chinese president from his visit to Moscow. But I hoped, but I knew it is not very likely because there is so much in common between China and Russia. Typically in my vlogs, I try not to give you analysis of my understanding of other countries because I'm not a diplomat, I'm not a professional in that, and I don't go deep into your politics of your countries because I understand that what is on the surface can be very different from what is inside. But of course, China is very different from many countries of the world, and I think that it has a lot in common with Russia. That's why they actually support each other. But this support is a little bit different from the support that Ukraine receives from its allies, because our friends and countries that support us, people and governments, everything is based on democracy, freedom, and mutual respect. And I think that China has started the process of annexation of Russia. This process is going to be slow because China is never in a hurry. For their worldview, centuries are okay. And at the same time, Russia is very much dependent on China and its decisions. But they need each other because both countries are run by totalitarian, authoritarian leaders. Well, Xi Jinping is a representative of the Communist Party. And that could be the end of my video because I am totally against communism and I have never witnessed anything positive that came out of this regime. I believe that Russia was asking for a permission to start this war, and it received that permission from Xi Jinping before actually attacking Ukraine. And perhaps two of leaders, so-called leaders, believed they will manage to do it really quickly so that Putin will be able to take over Ukraine in a couple of days, and it won't be difficult for Xi Jinping to pretend that he did not notice anything. They were talking a lot about the support of each other, about historical bonds, about economic perspectives, and so on and so forth. But for me, it is a bad signal that Xi Jinping, when he came to Moscow on the 20th of March and he stays there until the 22nd of March, which is actually 3 days, that he was the one to shake Putin's hand. Because for me, Putin is not an object or subject or whatever of global politics. He is not the president, he is a war criminal, he is a dictator that must be arrested, handcuffed, and all of that. Definitely he is not the person to shake hands with. China balances and tries to demonstrate itself as a peacemaker, but we know that the offer of the peace treaty for Ukraine is unacceptable because it says nothing about the withdrawal of Russian troops, and it tries to dictate, same as Russia, they believe that big countries have their zones of influence and they can do whatever they want. They constantly call war in Ukraine a conflict, and I am convinced that the results of war in Ukraine will influence China's decision on Taiwan and Hong Kong. By the way, my greetings to the subscribers from these beautiful countries, and I wish you strength, bravery, and we must win, because if we lose, these are decades of misery and then we will win. But why do we need these decades of misery? Because I'm convinced that freedom, democracy, good is supposed to win always. So definitely a negative thing is that Xi Jinping came to Moscow after the decision of International Criminal Court, thus demonstrating that it does not mean much to him and to countries like his, the ones that respect communism, authoritarian regimes, and do not give much space for freedom, democracy, or conversation. Also, they are trying to polarize the world, and that is what actually happening. Very often China does not want to be associated with war in Ukraine and Russia, and they try to visualize themselves as the opposition to the United States, so that China together with Russia are the opposition to the United States and Western countries of Europe. And I think once again that this rhetoric of the Cold War is introduced by empires like communist empires, and it is a problem because they will try to divide the world further, and this division is not into, I don't know, those who like beer and those who like wine, but those who allow freedom and those who don't. And this is tragic for many millions of people, and that's why once again it's so important for Ukraine to win and to create this precedent so that other authoritarian regimes that are in doubt whether to occupy other territories will stop, because they realize that the civilized democratic world is united and nothing is possible. I think that China secretly supplies Russia with weapons. They have given them drones on they have sold them drones on $12 million, but this is just the peak of the iceberg. And in general, I think that just as the visit of President Biden was a signal that the United States will not give up on Ukraine, Xi Jinping tries to demonstrate that China will not give up on Russia. And they are a huge country, a huge economy, and they are authoritarian. And we know that authoritarian regimes, they need each other to imitate their legacy. How do you say it? Anyway, I think that, of course, when this war went unexpectedly for Putin, he was not successful. It continues for a year. Sanctions destroy Russian economy. China tries to help them avoid sanctions. But anyway, in the head of Xi Jinping, Putin is a loser. But he is a loser that China will support and slowly annex his territories, and Russia is an object for them. And a very vivid signal is that before the visit of the Chinese president to Moscow, many Russian names, many names of Russian cities at the Far East returned back officially their Chinese names in China. So they started naming cities that were once Chinese and then were added to the territory of Russian Empire at the end of the 19th century and were given Russian names. Now China has returned official Chinese names to these cities, and this is nothing else but a signal of their slow cultural and then political and economic annexation of these territories. Moreover, we know that many Russian cities that border China are overpopulated with Chinese people and Chinese businesses who actually now dictate the tendencies within these regions. So in general, it all demonstrates that China is going to support Russia, but China is also going to swallow Russia in future because the country is weak, but the country is authoritarian. So this is not about friendship or being allies. This is just about the situational cooperation. Putin will definitely beg Xi Jinping for support because the economy is falling with sanctions. Xi Jinping has these possibilities, and they have weapons and they have economic tools to support Russia, and that's the problem. They want to imitate that they are peacemakers, but of course this will always mean sacrifice of Ukrainian interests, and we will never accept that. And I'm grateful that the majority of our allies understand that China is not the country to be central in the outcome of Russia-Ukraine war. And also for Chinese, it's like, okay, if it takes a century to um, change the political or territorial situation, they are prepared to wait, but perhaps their plans are to conquer the world. And another thing that I don't like, that during this visit we don't receive much news, and that's so typical of China. If we think about the COVID pandemics and how they hid information, that is actually also a crime. I'm not saying like in any other place in the world an epidemic can occur, but it's so important to share information quickly and to react quickly, because this can help avoid many deaths, avoid the spread of the epidemic. But Chinese society is different, is very authoritarian, and I do have some friends who live there, and they tell that the norms of COVID quarantine and the ways the state follows every person is really terrifying, and that sometimes they use this as an opportunity to control everything and to include this video observations, mobile monitoring and everything, making them a new technological authoritarian state. So we have to be really careful, because Putin and Xi Jinping are trying to separate the world and to create this X of evil. And the problem is that they have enough resources to do that. So we have to be really strong and persistent and united, and not get tired of this war, because this war is civilizational. And a very good signal here is that the Prime Minister of Japan, Kishida, unexpectedly decided to visit Kyiv, and he also visited Bucha. And I did like his reaction to this visit, because he was not politically correct, and he was not saying something about the rebuilding of these territories. He said that he felt rage. He was enraged with the scenes of crimes committed by Russians there, and I think that rage, anger are correct words to describe the emotions all of us have when we see Bucha and Irpin. By the way, you can check our video of Russian crimes committed in Bucha and Irpin. I will leave a link in this video. And I think this is also an important signal that Japan, a country of democracy and freedom, a very old and interesting culture, wants to demonstrate that Japan with Ukraine and with the democratic world. And once again, this shows that polarization of the world. But it is nothing new. It did not begin with Russian war in Ukraine. It existed for decades, and I think that this Cold War is actually not war, but perhaps a philosophy, a great difference between countries, many of which need freedom, love freedom, and consider it vital, and other countries that hate freedom, forbid freedom, and consider it ruining. Thank you so much that you like freedom and you like Ukraine. Thank you for your support. Thank you for buying me coffees, becoming my patrons. This helps us develop the project and reach more subscribers. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, because the world needs to know more about Ukraine. Slava Ukraini!